The Congressional Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic is closing out its 2-year investigation after finding that COVID-19 likely came from a lab in Wuhan, China. The subcommittee reporting that the virus had a biological characteristic that could not be found in nature. The report also says that social distancing and wearing masks were not backed by scientific data, and that American children lost, quote, decades worth of academic progress. Let's bring in John Elliott, who is a former Trump national security aide and author of the new book, The Biden-Harris Betrayal, Weak and Woke on the World Stage. John, your reaction to the House's findings?
Well, Todd, good morning. Look, this is something that we've known now. They've been looking at this for 2 years, but we knew way back when Rand Paul was taking it right to Tony Fauci in that hearing, and Tony Fauci wouldn't answer any of his questions directly about whether it came from the lab. But more pointedly, what he didn't answer in that session with Rand Paul was whether or not he profited in any way from the research that went in both to the vaccine and also the research that was done at that lab. So this is not telling us anything new, but what it does, it gives a stamp of authority onto what most people suspected is that this, look, Fauci was all over the place. He was talking about masking, saying it didn't work. Then he said, you've got a mask. Then he said, you need double masks. Then he said, maybe you don't, et cetera. So he was all over the place. When we were at the White House National Security Council early on in the pandemic, we worked directly with Tony Fauci. And look, back then he was all over the place. And so this subcommittee report, once again, it just reinforces what most Americans know, is that this didn't come from some bat in some Wuhan lab or in some kind of a wet market. Instead, it came from a lab that was completely generated, in some cases reportedly funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars.
Okay, so is this it, or does something else follow this once President Trump takes office, Republicans take the Senate, and the House maintains its Republican control?
Well, what I think, Todd, is that you're going to see a lot more oversight of this because Americans are really tired. I mean, we lost, to your point about the children. Look, also old people who are in old folks' homes, et cetera, they would not even be seen by their relatives as they passed away under this lockdown. And so nobody wants to see this happen again. And this is why there's going to be real accountability. Once again, this ties a bow on it. And this is a way that Congress can now say, look, we want to make sure that this never, ever happens again. And we have this bogus science at the top and all this masking mandates that really hurt the American people.
We certainly will be watching. Meantime, President-elect Trump wants a ceasefire and hostage deal in Gaza before Inauguration Day. Writing on Truth Social, please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East. John, what could that hell look like? And why hasn't President Biden unleashed that same hell over the course of the last 14 months to get those hostages home?
Well, that's the question, Todd, is that, look, that's the power of the United States. But what you need is you need a leader like President Trump. Look, he basically bankrupted Iran by taking the fight to them, killing Soleimani, and they had putting sanctions on them where they were only $7 billion in cash reserves right before President Trump left office. Guess what? Now they have over $80 billion of cash reserves under President Biden. So all of the Middle East is laughing at the Biden leadership. And so, look, this is President Trump putting it in all caps. Do you remember back in 1980 when Ronald Reagan said the same thing to the Iranians with our hostages over there? He said, don't wait until I come into office because you're not going to like it. This is the same thing, yet it's on steroids with President Trump because people have seen him 4 years ago and the way he acts in the Middle East, and he's going to bring it right back to them.
I remember reading about that Reagan thing because I was only 2 at the time, John. But getting back to the serious matter here, do you think a ceasefire and hostage deal ultimately happens by Inauguration Day?
Well, this hostage deal is very simple. The Hamas are going to look in right now to President Trump coming in office, and they have they can end this right now, return the hostages, surrender, and that's what's going to be the terms. There's not going to be a negotiation in terms of getting them out. They need to just return the hostages, period. These are being held now for over a year, and this is something that is not acceptable, and President Trump is going to make them come to the table, return the hostages, and essentially sue for peace.
Meantime, Ukrainian President Zelensky signals he would be open to a peace deal with Russia. Wall Street Journal reporting in exchange, he wants to join NATO. He wants to make sure Ukraine gets NATO membership. Do you see that happening?
Well, everybody in NATO has said that that is something that is off the table. But look, he's trying to negotiate this. The best thing about the negotiation is that everybody knows with President Trump coming into office, he's the art of the deal. He knows how to get these things done. And so for Biden at the last minute to be providing an extra arms package there and to try to get the negotiation going, that is something that really President Trump's going to solve this on his own terms, and that he's the decision maker in these things. And that's why the President Trump was reelected by Americans.
So just to be clear, you don't think the $725 million that we are sending now, new money to Ukraine, is money well spent?
Not at all. This is something where, look, do you want to, when two sides are going to come together and you have one side, Russia, that is the stronger side, why before those negotiations are you going to clock them in the nose and then expect them to come to the table and not treat you differently at that point? They need to bring both sides together, and once again, President Trump's going to make that happen. And to provide these additional weapons right at the last minute is something that, look, it is not helpful for the negotiations once President Trump gets in office.
John Elliott, thank you for your time on all these topics. We appreciate it.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.